Good morning, everyone. In today's plant material presentation, we're going to talk about seeding calculations. We're going to describe several common calculations that planters will need to make when developing or installing a seeding. There are many different calculations that might be needed depending on the type of planting method you are using or the type of equipment being used or the design of the planting. This webinar is part of a plant materials seeding webinar series. The series is designed to be used as a unit, and important information from one webinar will be needed to fully understand information in other webinars. So we really encourage you to watch all of the different webinars in series. And this is part of the plant materials introductory training. You may be asking yourself, what do I really need to calculate for a seeding? In most cases, a conservation planner will need to know how much seed to apply per unit area. So that could be the number or weight of live seed. So this helps to ensure that there's enough seed to establish, but not too much that the seeded species will compete with each other when establishing. So to accomplish this, we need to know how much seed to sow for a given area and how to adjust that for the seeding method you might be using. For example, if you're using a drill seeder versus a broadcast seeder, you might need to make adjustments if you have a drill seeder that has different row spacings. You might need to make seeding calculations based on seed size or the site conditions. For example, if it's a critical area that you're seeding. So what you're going to calculate is really going to depend on how much information is available and the complexity of the seeding mix, the species that are selected, and the severity of the site disturbance. You might also make adjustments based on the pure live seed versus bulk seed, and if any seed carriers are being used. There are 5 common seeding calculations that we're going to cover today. These are commonly encountered when you're putting together a seeding plan. The first is simply having a simple conventional single species seeding. So we're going to discuss, we're also going to discuss how to adjust calculations if you change the between row spacing of your drill seeder. And in the third example, we're going to talk about and show examples of using a mix that has multiple species and how you would calculate how much of each of those species you're going to need in the mix. The fourth example is what you need to adjust when you're doing a broadcast seeding. And the fifth calculation is going to be examples of calculations for planting in a critical area planting. So we're going to go through a lot of different detail of calculations in this webinar. We're also going to provide references for future use. So for now in this webinar, we hope that you come away with some basic understanding of what's needed in calculations, the logic behind it, the mechanisms behind each step, because they're really important. Before we start discussing those 5 common calculations, let's discuss some basic information that you're going to need before beginning at seeding calculations. Well, first of all, we need to know what species are going to be included in the mix. And that's typically determined during the planning phase of a seeding when you're developing the seed mix. And you can look at webinars 1 and 2 for more information on that. But basically, we want to select species that are well adapted to the site and they provide the needed conservation function. Next, we need to know the percent of each species in the mix. And that's based on the function of the species in the mix, their compatibility with other species in the mix, and the target number of pure live seeds per desired unit area. The percent of each species to use is not a hard and fast rule. There are numerous permutations of relative percentages that will result in a successful conservation planting. The goal is really to optimize establishment success, maximize a conservation benefit, and to do it in a timely and cost-effective manner. Other items that we're going to need to know before starting a seeding are the number of seeds per pound of each species, the full stand seeding rate of each species, and the amount of pure live seed for each species that we purchased. And let's talk about each of these in more detail. So the first two items we wanted to discuss were the species in the mix and the percent of each species in the mix. So this is an example seed mix that we used in our second webinar. It might be a mix that you would use for erosion control and wildlife habitat on shallow loamy soils in a rangeland situation that receives 10 to 14 inches of precip. You can see that we've selected species for the seed mix that are based on the site inventory, so they're suited to the climate. They're address the landowner objectives and the resource concerns for the site. Then we selected the percent of each species we want in the mix. And in this case, the species were selected and the percent decided based on the ecological site description and what the natural proportion of each of these species would be when they exist on the site. The third piece of required information is the number of seeds per pound for each species. And this number is used in making additional calculations. So the full stand, which would be a single species seeding rate, is based on the number of seeds per pound and the target number of seeds to be planted in a unit area. Depending on the species, seed size can vary. You can see in this photo how seed size influences the number of seeds per pound, and then this in turn influences the seeding rate. This table is from one of our technical notes. You can find it in Plant Materials Technical Note MT46 or Wyoming 3. And it provides for common species used in conservation plantings, the number of seeds per pound of those species. And I just want to note that the actual number of seeds per pound of any species is an estimate. So this value might vary from year to year or from seed lot to seed lot or by the cultivar that you use. But if you're looking for information for the conservation species that we use, the best source of information for the number of seeds per pound is going to be found in our plant materials technical notes. And those are located on the Montana and Wyoming Plant Materials website. If you don't find information on a particular species on that site, you can go to the plants database and look at the plant guide for those species. You can also look at the seed calculators that we have available for Montana and Wyoming, and they'll provide the seed per pound per species that we commonly seed. And if you can't find it in any of those plant material resources, you can look at commercial seed catalogs. But again, I just want to note that you're going to find different amounts of seeds per pound information when you look at different publications. It might vary from vendor to vendor if you're looking at commercial seed catalogs. And I would say when in doubt, refer to the plant materials information, because many of the species we're using are plant materials that were developed and released from plant material centers, and they've done the counting of the seeds per pound and have the most accurate information. The fourth piece of required information before we began a seeding is the full stand seeding rate of each species. This number is the basis for making almost all additional seeding calculations. And it is typically based on sowing a target number of live seeds per unit area. If you know the rules of thumb for the target number of seeds per desired unit area, you can easily calculate the full stand seeding rate of any species. This table, again, from our plant materials technical notes, shows what the recommended full stand seeding rate is in pure live seed pounds per acre. This rate is based on using a drill seeder on a good site, so a non-critical area site. And it's also based on using a 12-inch between row spacing in our drill seeder. For most of these species, we're aiming to have 20 to 25 pure live seeds per square foot. This is the target number when you have a medium-sized seed. And this range is based on research and observational experience on successful stand establishment. The target number of seeds per unit area also reflects seed size. And in Montana and Wyoming, we use these target ranges for the number of seeds per square foot. So you can see, as I mentioned on the previous slide, for a medium-sized seed, that would be a seed where you have 80,000 to 800,000 pure live seeds per pound. We're going to aim for 20 to 25 seeds per square foot. Now, if you have a smaller seed where you have over 800,000 pure live seeds per pound, you're going to increase your target number of seeds per square foot to 30 to 50. And this is because small seeds generally have less carbohydrate reserves and they perish more easily than large seeds. And they also have a greater potential to be planted too deep where they're not going to germinate. So we increase the seed rate to increase the success of that species when it's seeded. Large seeds then, so seeds that are over 80,000 pure live seeds per pound, we're going to decrease the target seeds per square foot to 15 to 20 seeds per square foot. And we do this because large seeds generally produce robust competitive seedlings. They tend to survive well. They tend to be larger stature plants that require more space to grow. And also large seeds can sometimes become logistically difficult to sow at high numbers because of the seed size. So if you don't have the full stand recommended rate from the plant materials information for a species, you can easily calculate it by taking the desired number of seeds per foot times the number of square feet in an acre and divide that by the number of seeds per pound for that species, and you can get the full stand rate. And we'll work through a couple examples of that. This table again is from our plant material tech notes, and I just want to show you how we calculated some of the full stand rates of these species. So again, you're using this calculation, the desired number of seeds per foot, the area of an acre, divided by the number of seeds per pound to get the full stand rate for a drill seeding with 12-inch row spacings. So in this example, let's look at intermediate wheatgrass. This is a large seed. So we have 79,000 seeds per pound. So in that case, based on our previous slide, we're going to be aiming for 15 to 20 seeds per square foot when we plant. So let's just say we want 18 seeds per square foot. If we take 18 times 43,560, divide it by the number of seeds per pound, which is 79,000, we get a seed rate of 10 pounds per acre. If we're using a small seed, so a seed that has over 800,000 seeds per pound, we are going to use the same calculation, but now our target seed rate is somewhere between 30 to 50 seeds per square foot. So let's just say we want 45 seeds per square foot. we would take 45 times the area of an acre divided by the number of seeds per pound, which is 1.3 million, and we get the full stand seeding rate for Timothy, which is 1.5 pure live seeds pounds per acre. Unfortunately, we have this information available of our recommended full stand seeding rate in our technical notes if you access our plant materials website. The fifth piece of required information before beginning seeding calculations is to know the percent pure live seed for each species. All of our NRCS seeding recommendations are based on pure live seed rates. As we described in webinar 3 on seed quality, this value indicates the number of actual live seeds that are going to be sown per unit area. It takes into account the viability of the seed lot, as well as other crop seed or weed seed or inert material that's included in that seed lot. So the percent pure live seed is calculated by multiplying the percent purity of the lot by the percent germination or viability of that lot. And this information is going to be found on your seed labels and your laboratory analysis. Bulk seed, on the other hand, includes both the live seed and all other seed and inert material. And we're going to get to an example of this in just a few slides. Okay, now let's go back to the 5 basic seeding calculations that I mentioned we would cover today. And I feel like the best way to learn about seeding calculations is by example. So let's work through a few examples. Let's say you are developing a project and you've determined that given your site conditions and your conservation objectives, a solid stand of thick spike wheatgrass is ideal for the planting. You know you're going to drill seed it using a conventional drill. You know that it's a good site, it's not a critical area, and you know that you're going to be using 12-inch between row spacings. And you want to seed 2 acres. And also in this example, you're going to be purchasing seed from a dealer where you can request to buy the seed in pure live seed. So what is it in this case that we need to calculate? First of all, we want to go to our plant material tech notes, and we want to look up what the standard full stand seeding rate is for 12-inch row spacing for thick spike wheatgrass. And we see that it's 7 pure live seeds pounds per acre. The only thing that we would need to calculate then in this example is a number of pounds for the 2 acres we want to plant. So we simply take the 2 acres times the full stand rate, which is 7 pounds per acre, and we know that we need 14 pure live seed pounds per acre for this planting. And then when we order from the seed vendor, we specify that we want pure live seed, the quantity in pure live seed. Now let's use the same example this time, but this time let's say that the seed vendor that we're buying from only sells in a bulk seed basis. Now we need to remember the calculations for pure live seed that we learned in our last webinar. As a quick review, pure live seed is the percent purity times the percent germination or viability. Purity of the seed that we're buying, when added to the inert material, the weed seed, and other crop seed, should total 100%. So the seed that we're buying, we want it to be as pure as possible. So we're looking for a really high number of purity, and hopefully the inert material and weed seed that we don't want in our seed lot is of just a very minor amount. Our total viable seed then is the percent germination plus the percent hard seed. So sometimes on seed tags, you'll see germination and hard seed value and a total viability. So in that case, your PLS will be percent purity times the percent viability. Okay, so getting back to our example, what do we need to calculate? Since we know the full stand seed rate per acre, we need to multiply that by 2 acres. We know we want 7 PLS by 2 acres, so we need 14 PLS pounds per acre. Since our dealer only sells on a bulk seed basis, we need to convert our PLS amount to bulk pounds. And we do that by looking at the seed tags and getting the amount of purity. So in this case, 99.19, and the total viability, which is 97%. And we multiply 99 by 97%, and we get 96% PLS. To calculate our bulk seed, then, we take the total amount of PLS needed and divide it by the percent PLS. So we know we need 14 PLS pounds per acre. We have a PLS percent of 96%. So we need 14.55 bulk pounds for our 2 acres for this field project. A good rule of thumb to remember is that the bulk seed amount is always going to be more than the pure live seed amount for a project. Okay, I want to just look at example 1 in one other way, just to give you different examples of seeding calculations that you might need to make. So in this example, let's say that we do not have a full stand PLS seeding rate for thick spike wheatgrass, so we don't have any tech notes available. How would we calculate the needed seed rate per acre? And that's by going back to some of the information that we talked about at the beginning, the required information before you begin a seeding. We want to know the number of seeds per pound for the species. So in this case, it's 152,000 seeds per pound. That is a medium-sized seed. So we know that our target seed rate should be 20 to 25 seeds per square foot. We know the area, the square feet per acre. And we use a calculation, again, the desired seeds per square foot by the area of the acre. And we multiply those together to get the needed number of live seeds per acre. And we divide that by the number of seeds per pound of that species. And we come up with the full stand rate, which in this case is 7.16 PLS pounds, or we can approximate that at 7 pounds per acre. Okay, let's move on to the next seeding calculation that you're going to be working with, and that is adjusting row spacing of a drill seeder. So as I mentioned, our full stand seeding rates are based on 12-inch between row spacing. So what if you're using a drill seeder that has fixed rows and they're at different between row distances? Or if you're seeding a species like Russian wild rye that needs to be seeded at different wider row spacings, then in those cases, we're going to need to adjust our full stand seed rate for different between row configurations. Our full stand seeding rates, as I mentioned, are based on the number of seeds per pound of a species, plus the target number of seeds that you want per linear foot or square foot. This means that if we deviate too far from the 12-inch row spacing, we need to do some adjustments. Otherwise, we could be planting either too many or too few seeds per square foot. If we have too few seeds per acre planted, we could result in a poor stand establishment. And if we have too many seeds planted within a row, it can add to the cost of the project, and it can also result in excessive seedling competition within the row. So again, if you're going to deviate from the 12-inch row spacing, the seeds per foot need to be, the seeds that you're planting per linear foot of row have to be adjusted to maintain the desired number of seeds that you want per square foot of the planting. So this is our rule of thumb for adjusting the row spacing. First of all, if you're using a 12-inch row spacing, follow the full stand seeding rate in your plant materials documents, the tech notes MT46 or Wyoming 3. If your row spacing is less than 12 inches, we use the same PLS pounds per acre rate as our 12-inch row spacing, and this is going to decrease the number of seeds per foot with the decreasing row spacing. If we're increasing our row spacing above the 12-inch width, we want to decrease the PLS pounds per acre rate, and that'll help maintain our target number of seeds per foot, the same as if we had a 12-inch row spacing. And again, let's just dive into a few examples of this. This table is referenced in our technical notes, and it's also included in the seed calculators we use for Conservation Practice Standards 342, 512, and 550. You can see that we recommend on row spacings that are less than 12 inches, we use and maintain the 12-inch full stand seeding rate for those row spacings. In this case, the number of seeds per foot that are planted decreases as the row spacing decreases. But the number of seeds planted per acre is going to stay consistent. This is considered acceptable since the number of seeds planted per unit area is still relatively close to our target rates of approximately 20 to 25 seeds per square foot. So as an example, if we use a full stand seed rate, we have 11-inch row spacings for slender wheatgrass at 7 pounds per acre. But now if we decrease our row spacing to 6 inches, we would still use the 7 pounds per acre rate for slender wheatgrass. But the number of seeds we're planting now per linear foot dropped from 22 seeds to 11 seeds. So a way to think about this is we've just doubled the amount of rows that we're using, and now half the number of seeds are going to be planted in each row. So then you maintain the same number of seeds planted per acre. In contrast, if you're going to be increasing your row spacing, the number of rows per acre is going to decrease. And as the row spacing increases above 12 inches, the number of seeds we plant per foot increases if we maintain the 12-inch row spacing rate. This could be a problem again because the higher number of seeds planted per linear foot could result in excessive seedling competition within the row, especially if you're on a dry land site. So to prevent this, we prefer to reduce the PLS pounds per acre rate in order to maintain an acceptable number of seeds per linear foot. So again, thinking about an example, if we have slender wheatgrass, the standard seed rate is 7 PLS pounds per acre for a full stand at 12-inch row spacing. If we increase the row spacing to 20 inches, we decrease the seeding rate. So we take 7 pounds per acre and multiply it by 0.6, and we get 4.2 pounds per PLS pounds per acre. And that'll give you the same seed density as if you were using the 12-inch seeding rate, 12-inch between row seeding rate. I think that can get a little bit complicated. So again, let's work through a couple examples, and we'll continue using our 1 species full stand rate of thick spike wheatgrass on a good site with a drill seeder. And now in this scenario, we're going to be looking at a 21-inch between row spacing. That results in 57% less rows planted per acre than if you used a 12-inch row spacing. So if we elected to have the same amount of seeding rate per acre, we would be sowing about the same amount of seed and almost half the number of rows per acre, and it would result in a doubling of our seeds per square foot planted. So to compensate for this, as the row spacing increases above 12 inches, we decrease the total number of PLS seeds planted per acre. And in this way, we can keep the number of seeds planted per square foot consistent. So the calculations for this would be done in two different ways. You could take the 7 PLS pounds per acre and multiply it by 57%, and you would get approximately 4 pounds per acre. Or you could take the PLS rate and divide it by 1.75, because your rows are now 1.75 times further apart, and you again would get about 4 PLS pounds per acre. And then for our 2 acres, we would double that. So we would have 8 PLS pounds for this field planting. Just briefly, another example on adjusting the row spacing. In this scenario, our between row spacing is only 7 inches. So now instead of having 209 rows across a square acre, like we would in our 12-inch row spacing, we now have 358 rows per acre. We keep the PLS pounds per acre consistent at 7 PLS pounds per acre, causing the number of seeds per linear foot to decrease from 24 seeds per square foot or seeds per linear foot to 13 seeds per linear foot. But we maintain an acceptable seeding rate per acre. So we have about 25 to 26 seeds per square foot. Let's move on now to another seeding example. And this is simply to have multiple species in our seed mix. So in this example, we're drill seeding. It's a good site, so it's not a critical area site. We have 12-inch between row spacings on our drill seeder. And so the only thing we need to calculate is the percent of each species in the mix. And that is done by deciding, again, this is the seed mix we talked about earlier in this webinar. We've chosen the species that we want based on the site conditions, the resource concerns, and the ecological site description. And we've decided on the percent of each species in the mix. We've gone to our plant material tech note and looked up the full stand seeding rate for each of the species. And then the calculation we use to determine how much of each species to include in the mix is simply the full stand rate times the percent of the species. So 7 PLS pounds per acre times 0.25. And we know we need to include 1.75 PLS pounds per acre of this species. For example, with Sandberg bluegrass, the full stand rate is 2 PLS pounds per acre. We want it to be 10% of our seed mix. So we calculate 2 times 0.1, we get 0.2 PLS pounds per acre that we want to include for this species in the mix. I want to point out that notice here the number of seeds per square foot that result for each of the species, and we're still at that target seed rate of between 20 and 25 seeds per foot for mostly medium-sized seeds in this case. The next seed calculation that you need to know is what to do when you're broadcast seeding versus drill seeding. So if you're broadcast seeding, seedling establishment tends to be lower than if you're drill seeding. And to compensate for this, we increase the seeding rate in a broadcast seeding by doubling the rate that we would use for a drill seed rate on a good site. So this is the same seed mix that we're carrying through from the last slide. The last slide had 7 pounds per acre seed rate for a drill seed rate for a full stand of this species. And now to broadcast seed, all we've simply done is multiply the full stand rate by 2. Then again, to look at the proportion of each species in the mix, we use the same calculation. We take the full stand rate for broadcast seeding, multiply that by the percent of the species in the mix, and we get the planned broadcast rate of 3.5 PLS pounds per acre. I want you to notice again on this example that by doubling the seed mix, we are now doubling the target number of seeds that we want per square foot in the broadcast seeding. On our last example, we're going to be looking at a critical area planting. When you are using a drill seeder on a critical area, again, the critical area is usually a steep site. It's a difficult site to establish plants on. It could be a mine site. It could be a post-wildfire site, one that it's hard to establish plants on. And the likelihood of establishing species is decreases. So now we're increasing our seed rate again. So if you're planting on a critical site, we double the seed rate for a drill seeder. We also double the seed rate if we broadcast seed a critical area. So just to clarify that, if you're broadcast seeding, you double the rate on a good site. If you're broadcast seeding on a critical area, you then double that rate again. So broadcast seeding on a critical area is going to quadruple the seeding rate. And you can see in this example again, our full stand rate for drill seeding was 7 pounds per acre. For broadcast seeding, we doubled that to 14 pounds per acre. And now on the critical area site, we're doubling that again. So 28 pounds per acre. And you can see how much seed is going on the ground, the increase of seed, and also that is dramatically going to increase the cost of the seeding. You then calculate the proportion of each species in the mix the same way, 28 pounds per acre times 0.25% of the mix, and you need to include 7 pounds PLS per acre of this species. Notice again that for this example where we're on a critical area and we're broadcast seeding, we've now quadrupled the amount of desired seeds per square foot. Now that we've discussed the 5 common seeding calculations, I just want to briefly mention that there are some other seeding calculations that you might encounter when you're putting together a seeding plan. And one of those might be using seed carriers or rice hulls. So why would you use rice hulls in a planting? Well, there's a lot of different benefits. One might be that they help facilitate the uniform distribution of different size seeds and help do it at an accurate rate, and they prevent seed separation in the mix. So they feed through a grain drill at roughly the same rate as barley, and this makes it easy to calibrate when you're trying to calibrate your drill for the seeding. They're going to give you a uniform distribution of both the small seeds at low seeding rates And they also help prevent bridging of light, fluffy seed in the drill. You can also see the cupped shape of the rice hulls are going to be able to hold the seed in proportion as the seed mix flows through the drill. We recommend you using US #1 grade rice hulls to ensure the quality and avoid sowing any undesirable species. These rice hulls will be clean, they'll be unbroken. There's a lot other types of carriers that are going to be available, but the rice hulls are really effective and they're relatively inexpensive. And because they're compatible with most grain drills, they're easy to calibrate in a seeding. How much rice hulls to use is based on the bushel weight of the seed and the rice hulls and the amount of seed that you're going to use per acre. And then it's converted into the pounds per acre. So calculating the seed mix volumes and weights using rice hulls is really more than we're going to discuss in this presentation, but we want you to be aware that there's a regional technical note, Plant Material 7, that describes this process in detail. Some other calculations that might be required when you're putting together a seeding might be that you'll need to understand and know when you're purchasing seed how much processing of that species has been done, because it can dramatically affect the number of seeds per pound, and that will then affect your seeding rate. So for example, for species like sandfoin or winterfat or four-wing saltbush, you need to know when you purchase the seed how much has been cleaned. Sandfoin, for example, if you buy it with the pod, you're going to be planting that seed at 34 PLS pounds per acre. And if you're planting and purchasing it without the pod, you'll be planting it at 21 PLS pounds per acre. Some other calculations you might need to know for planting: if you're going to be doing alternate row or cross seedings, plantings, you'll need to adjust your seeding calculation. And again, that's more information that we're going to be going into today, but we do have technical notes available on those seeding adjustments. Okay, we've covered a lot of different calculations today, and hopefully you're going to take home some good information from this presentation. But luckily in Montana and Wyoming, we do have automated seed calculators that do a lot of these seed calculations for us. They're going to automatically double the rates when you're broadcast seeding or when you're in a critical area planting. The calculators also will automatically adjust your row spacing or address change. They'll calculate the PLS in your certification page. So we want you to know that these tools are available to assist you, but we hope that you still get a good understanding of the basics of seed calculations and what is needed to calculate a seed mix and a seed rate, because these tools are not always going to be available to you, and you want to have just a good working understanding of how we calculate seed mix, especially when you're working with landowners out in the field, to give them an estimate of a seed rate and a seed mix that might be appropriate. Before I end the presentation, I just want to let you know that we have a lot of different plant material references available for you on our website, including our technical notes that I mentioned that have the standard seed rates and the seeds per pound of all of the species that are commonly used. We have different tech notes on how to adjust seed rates based on rice hulls, alternate row plantings, and more. So we hope that you take time to look up those resources. And you can access the seed calculators through the NRCS Field Office Technical Guides. Thank you. And if you ever have questions on seed rates or seeding calculations, please reach out to your plant material program specialists and we can help you out.